Whenever I start a new project that I intend to make public, I seem to inevitably reach a point where I need to figure out how to actually share it. Akin to thinking up some form of icebreaker with someone you've met for the first time, I often reach around inside my head in desperate search of the right string of words to form a coherent sentence. I stare at a blank page and start jotting down various random ideas until I find something that works. It still makes me smile thinking of it as I draw parallels to an author writing an epic adventure story. It's like they've figured out everything that happens on the adventure, in the middle, and how it should end before they figured out the beginning of why they started the journey in the first place. Most of the challenges we encounter in our lives are the ones we set for ourselves. So maybe for this challenge, perhaps the best way to start is to just start. So let's begin. My name is General Stargazer. It's not my only name, more of an alias, if you will. It has a meaning and significance beyond what you see just on the outside, but that is another story altogether. Over the years, I've been fortunate to visit different regions around the world, places that just everyone needs to visit, and others that some wouldn't even consider. I've been a person who has lived in more than one place. I've been a person with no place to live. I've met many different characters, listened to many different languages, even tried my hand at speaking a few. Yet I'm alone. That's not to say I haven't had friends, quite the opposite really. I have some that every time I'm with that I feel like I have a home, and sad when I realise that I'll have to say goodbye eventually. But I freely admit, I struggle with human interaction, with both people I don't know, and I've never done much better with the ones that I do. I just can't connect with people, or find the right thing to say or do. I'll always make time for people regardless of however busy I am, and I'll happily sit and read alone or listen to something in a language I haven't even figured out yet. But in acknowledging that I'm this way, I've tried to help myself with being better with it as well. Let me explain. One of the things that gives me a sense of fulfillment is the ability to help individuals and communities grow and flourish where I personally fail. I love having projects to do. So I'll happily sit, research, learn, plan, plot, and scheme things for people. Say, for example, the fact for the last 5 years I've organised a party in Iceland for largely an online community of people. As much as it's for everyone, it's also for me, to try and help me get better with interacting with people. But don't get me wrong, I'm no saint. I struggle, yet can never burden others with asking for help myself. I've had my fill of shortcomings and regrets as well. There have been many times where I thought I could help someone, but I've hurt people, and some I regret that I'll never be able to fix. So, instead I thought I'd try my hand at something new. When I travelled, I brought a leather-bound book with me, with hundreds of empty parchment pages inside. At first, I treated it as a journal. Whenever I had visited somewhere I hadn't been before, or I had a memorable story to tell from that day, I had written in an entry. It would serve as something to pass on to someone someday, or in case anything ever happened to me. But as time went on, its purpose evolved. It became both a storybook and also a cookbook, but I'll come back to that in a minute. I don't have much in the way of family in the world, and I fear there will be even fewer before long too. But I'm grateful for the time we've all had together, and the things they've taught me as well. Religious beliefs were never forced on me by my folks, which I think actually left me more open and accepting of the fact that we live in a multi-faith and a multicultural world. I was a big kid growing up. After leaving the Air Force and finding family life, my father put on a few pounds, but he's always been my hero growing up, and I wanted to be just like him. In my school years, I was bullied a lot because of my weight, and, for better or for worse, this turned me into a completely non-judgmental individual. Strange, I know. I had learnt that everything really is just a matter of perspective. Sure, a bully's effects on me were both physical and mental. No single person is born inherently good or bad. They're moulded by their experiences and the people around them. What people tend to forget is that the bully's life outside of the schoolyard is probably just as bad as the pain they're inflicting. I was never spiteful or hateful back to them. Indifference is one of the biggest diseases of all, after all. So I just tried to treat them as I would anyone else, and eventually they grew out of it. All their problems were solved. Some even became friends later in years. The journey was just a little bumpy. But this same reasoning is something I've brought with me everywhere I've gone, and with everyone I'm yet to meet. I have no preconceptions. Call me starry-eyed or naive, but I'm still here to tell this story. Speaking of story, let me get back to that book. During my travels, I have always had at least one bag with me. Within that bag, there has been some basic things. Clothes, design equipment, calculator pads, my book and pencils. Some places I went to and helped wanted to show their gratitude beyond just saying whatever the local dialect translated thank you to. So the book's second purpose came into play. If there's one thing I learned, universally, is that regardless of people's class, colour or creed, that they will always gather for a few special occasions. Two of those things are sharing a meal together and sharing a story. Sometimes both of those were also connected with each other. So, whenever I would visit somewhere, with each group I stayed with, I'd ask them before I left for one of two things: a story or a recipe. Some gave me a recipe, and then a short story about why they picked that recipe, or why it was important to them. Some just gave me a story that they knew but wanted to share. Once I have a new place to live again, I hope to share some of those recipes with you all as well. But the story element of it, at least, I can share with you all before then. My bag has been in countries where its contents would have been of having great value to some and worthless to others. Take, for example, a pad of paper and a pencil. In most populated zones, you'll find a shop that will be able to supply such thing for a minimal fee. But out in an isolated desert or high up in a mountainside, you won't regularly find such a thing. So, to a child, for example, in these regions, being able to give the ability to doodle could be priceless. Or, to someone like myself, it's an aid when I need to calculate or draw or even find some other way to communicate. A pencil and a paper isn't just a writing instrument after all. It's a tool. It's a tool that can help write stories that inspire, sketch images that can spark the imagination, can form, create, and bind deals and communities together that can end conflicts. Stories form so much of the world around us. From the early years before written language, pictographs, cave drawings were used to show images of the history of the people, sharing their knowledge and stories of generations passed on. Then stories were passed with the creation of verbal language, fables and tales imparting wisdom. Then the written language has documented the history of us all, taught us more and more, generation after generation. Feedback from what we've done wrong, as to not repeat our mistakes, have been critical to the growth of us all. We wouldn't have been able to grow without it. With cooking, we learned which ingredients, recipes and foods are safe to eat, which are poison, which tastes good, which stirs an emotion, and what combinations of food we can put together for explosions of flavour and taste. Then gatherings of people traditionally preparing food together, sometimes alone, as a family, sometimes even as a large group, as a community. Even those recipes from families were passed on. Today we have multiple cultures and countries, different food recipes of local foods, spices, continue to combine and fuse together to some wonderful, tantalizing dishes. It's storytelling that introduced us to unparalleled levels of creativity and new ways of bringing us all together. Books to sit and read together, movies to sit and watch together, or games to play with each other. To escape and dream of another place, to put ourselves in the shoes of another, and to learn from other people's mistakes. Another video on this channel from the game Never Alone stated the reason why I got into playing indie games, video making and storytelling. That person and the same reasoning still holds true today, and in part is the reason why I ended up travelling and gathering stories and recipes for my book. I had hoped that I'd be able to get my friend around, read the stories from the book and share the recording of it, but sadly I can't. While staying in a first world country, I was out getting a gift for my friend, and my apartment was broken into, and my bag was stolen. While some of it had some value, most of it, unfortunately, was sentimental. My watch, for example, which was the last gift from my mother before she died. My book, with all the people I'd seen, with all the recipes and the stories. Some of the people that had written in the book are no longer with us. That really did hit me hard, and I've been horribly unfocused and unsettled ever since. With regards to the book at least, however, there was at least some silver lining. I had visited my friend a short while before, and when I visited and rustled up a couple of the meals using the recipes that I'd been given in the book. However, instead of bringing the book, I actually took pictures of the pages on my phone. But because I didn't know which to cook, I actually took a picture of a large portion of the recipes and the stories associated with some of them. So, with that somewhat myriad and verbose story, you're now all up to date. I aim to try and share with you some of these stories, each week hopefully. Probably late on a Sunday is what I'll be aiming for. The stories will be diverse. Some will have obvious origins, some will be from cultures vastly different from what you'd expect. Some will have lessons, some won't. Some you may have even heard of before. But they are all the stories I have learnt and the stories I'll share. I'm here, I'll always make the time, and I'll always listen. All you have to do is start talking. I can't make any promises, but if you talk and share your story, I'll certainly always try my best to be of worth to you and carry on your story for as long as I am alive. Thank you.